And you are looking at a shot of the mouth of Halifax Harbour here on a beautiful day in Nova Scotia. A special day, the culmination of the Tall Ships Regatta for 2017, the parade of sail as the ships begin to come into a formation to prepare for that parade and give people quite a sight. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, tens of thousands, who knows, lined along the Halifax Harbour. There are lots of eyes on this event today, and we're happy to bring it to you. Hello everyone, I'm Tom Murphy along with Allan Billard, and it's great to have you along on board, Allan. Allan is the author of Port of Call, Tall Ships Visit to the Maritimes, and really a fantastic guide to what has been a fantastic Tall Ships Regatta so far.
And it's not over yet. They're still going to go to several places in the Maritimes, including St. John, New Brunswick, which is their last port of call for this season.
That's right. We'll talk more about that as we continue with the broadcast here. Let's take you down now to the Parade of Sail, which is beginning in earnest now. And Allan, who is an expert in the field here, will help us along with this. But really, most people need little cue about this tall ship here. That is the beautiful Bluenose II, Allan.
Yes, and I'm so proud of Bluenose II. It's had its troubles, and for heaven's sakes, it's been in the news a lot for not the right reasons, but look at it. It's special, and it's showing off its colors. I'm so proud of Bluenose.
No, it's been fantastic, and it's been, of course, a featured guest and a host in many ways to this event in Halifax here, because it is the home province for Bluenose II. But catching a lot of eyes over the last few days on the Halifax waterfront, and I was talking to some of the crew aboard Bluenose II on Friday, and they said that they were really taken aback by the number of tours that were booked and that came aboard, people that came aboard that ship.
And the managers of the ship are trying very hard to include it in all of the activities around the Maritimes. It is going to go to, it's been in Pictou, it's going to go to Digby, it's traveling around and making sure that Nova Scotians can see the special thing that it's become again.
Yeah, I mean, you and I were talking before we came on the air here about what Bluenose II and the Bluenose of the past has meant for this province in terms of recognition, the spirit of that province, and that really is what they try to capture in the construction of that ship.
Yes, because ships are the beauty queens of the sea. And this one is particularly beautiful because of the way she was designed by a naval architect in Dartmouth who understood the beauty of the sea, but also, more importantly, understood how to catch the wind. And the third most important characteristic of Bluenose was she had to be able to fish and carry a lot of fish, because there was no way it was going to win the Fisherman's Trophy unless it was an actual fishing vessel. So it was designed with those three things in mind, and it's accomplished that.
You know, it's amazing when you think about the history of Bluenose in this province. We see it as a symbol of this province now, and it's a national symbol. Obviously, it's on the dime, and it means a lot to a great many Canadians. But back in the day, in the Bluenose heyday, if you like, it was really a source of pride and accomplishment for this province, wasn't it?
More so for the actual fishermen, because when they landed a position on Bluenose crew, they knew they were going to make money. They had a tremendous skipper known for his ability to catch fish. And that meant they were going to get a bigger share, and that meant that everybody was going to be happy when they came back to port. So it was because it was the best place to be a fisherman that first made it famous.
And you talked, I mean, it's known for its speed, obviously, its racing history. What can you tell people, remind people about that part of what helped make the Bluenose what it is?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
It was the fastest schooner of its day, right?
It certainly was.
There was a sense that, yes, it was a fishing vessel, but part of what made it successful was that it was so fast.
Yes, and it was never beaten. And in fact, before the Bluenose was designed, constructed, and started to sail, schooners from New England were regularly claiming the title of the fastest Grand Banker. And I guess Lunenburgers are too proud to allow that to go on too long. So when they engaged Rui to design it, they said, what can you tweak? What can you do here? What can you do there? And some of the sailors on board will say, yeah, well, you know, he did this and he did that, and she's a little less comfortable than she should be.
Yeah.
But then they wink at you and they say, but we go faster than anybody. So there was some give and take in the design. It was specifically tweaked to go fast.
What do you think Angus Walters would think of a day like this?
There's not enough wind for Angus Walters. I want to get out there, get offshore, and pick up a breeze, because I don't have all my sails up yet today, and I want to go places.
So what will happen here, it's a good point, not all the sails up. Well, I mean, this is, we should explain to people, there's been a marshalling that's been happening here, getting these ships into a particular order for the parade of sail. They've done a loop around, or beginning to do a loop around the Halifax Harbour here, the Dartmouth side first, and now out between the Halifax waterfront and George's Island, and out outside the harbour, where their work will begin in earnest. Not so much Bluenose, as I understand it, it's not racing in the back to France, but some of these ships are part of a regatta, which will be making its way to France. 6
of them are using this as their stepping off point, and as soon as they get outside the harbour entrance, they're going to be looking for every available wind, a gust, a breeze, get me going, and they're going to be raising all their sails, and they're going to be turning and going as quickly as they can to Le Havre.
Yeah. And so that's obviously something that people will be listening to and wanting to hear about, see how this whole thing does unfold, because there has been a piqued interest in tall ships, obviously, these last few days in Nova Scotia. As you can see by the people who are lining the waterfront there, you see them off to the side, Alan, and they're here at Black Rock Beach, where people are looking for a shady spot if they can find one, others enjoying a beautiful sunny day, and they perhaps have, well, we have a pretty good view on things here in the studio with our camera angles, but they've got quite a scenic view there as well, Alan.
Yeah, I think they're far happier out there catching the rays and enjoying the breeze. They're in an air-conditioned comfort, but I would rather be there than here.
No, it's a gorgeous scene out there, and obviously people always come to the shoreline on an occasion like this.
Yep.
I guess in that way, it's just proof that so many of us are people of the sea, whether we know it or not. We're certainly attracted to the shoreline on a day like today.
And you know what they have? They've got the smell of the ocean. They've got the mussels and the seaweed and the odd fish or two they can watch, and it smells so nice to be on the waterfront.
Yeah, I should have arranged to have some of that piped in here for you, Alan, to put you in the mood. But you're right there. We can't top that for sure. And skipping a few rocks as well as they patiently wait for these tall ships to come by. And as we say, Bluenose II leading the pack, and they will be followed in good time and in good order by the rest of the ships as well, as we take a glimpse from our harbor cam there at the U.S. Coast Guard vessel, which so many have stopped and toured as well here. This is Eagle.
She's actually one of the most world famous of tall ships. When she goes places, people want to see her, partly because she's one of the biggest and she's fully rigged, and well, she's not
stopped there right now, it seems.
Yeah.
That's our technology.
I think it was our technology,
yes.
But it is one of the most popular ships. So is Bluenose, and we're going to see in a little while, we're going to see Europa, which is a fully rigged bark from Amsterdam. Those are world famous vessels, and I'm saying Bluenose is too.
It's pretty incredible when you think about the nautical miles that some of these vessels put on, and the condition that they're in. As people got to see them up close these last few days, they are in stellar condition. They're beautiful ships, but they, as you say, they are literally all around the world.
And the Sail Training International, which is the organization that looks after tall ship parades all over the world, wants them to keep going and go places they've never been before, and they do go through the Pacific Ocean to way up to the coast of Russia. I mean the eastern side of Russia. They go to China, they go to Australia, they go to the Mediterranean Sea. It's not just here in Nova Scotia that we're lucky enough to have them.
As we watch Bluenose II there as it begins to make its way out of the harbor, you mentioned that not all the sails are up. In fact, we see the sails up, but these tall ships today, as we see a shot there fired, they are being powered by motor as well on a day like this.
Almost all of them have motors, not all. When they start the race, they're going to have to turn that off. It's sail power only. There's an old expression, 3 sheets to the wind, and it comes from a situation like this where you've got your sails up, but they're not catching any wind. They're just kind of lufting.
Right.
And well, the expression is better known for its description
impairment, I think.
Of impairment, yeah. But, and that's kind of what the ship is at the moment. Its movement is impaired. So most of them are under diesel power at the moment. Yeah.
You see in the foreground there, not all tall ships part of this today, obviously, as some boat enthusiasts getting a fantastic view of this as well with their own personal vessels in the harbor today. We should say there are some rules around how close they can get to a tall ship. Waterfront development folks telling us yesterday that they are trying to encourage boaters to stay to one side because they would like for these tall ships to pass between the Halifax side of the harbor and George's Island, so that people, as we saw earlier on the Black Rock Beach area, would get a fantastic view, but also for the safety of the vessels. But at the same time, they're not discouraging private boaters or individual boaters from being there, because it is, after all, their harbor as well. But there are some designated areas where they've asked those vessels to stay in sort of little clumps areas around the harbor where they would be safe and not to obstruct the parade of sail, as we see now from behind the Bluenose II making its way out.
And Bluenose is on the 10-cent piece, but it can't stop on a dime. And that's kind of a goofy way of saying, be careful, because when these ships are underway, they can't just turn like that. And if there's a kayaker right under the bowsprit, there's going to be a problem.
Well, we were looking earlier, we did see some kayaks out there, and no doubt over the course of the next little while we'll see some more in the harbor. But you were pointing out that it's actually the kayaks that have the right-of-way. Is that correct?
Yeah, which is...
You're a kayaker, so maybe you're biased.
Well,
in this regard.
it's good and it's bad. I mean, the kayak shouldn't be there in the first place, but if it is, the powered vessel has to do everything possible to avoid it.
Yeah. So there we go. This is, again, sort of, as we look out the mouth of the harbor, some of the formation beginning to happen. There is a particular order for these ships, and it begins, as we mentioned off the top, with Bluenose II, because it is considered the home vessel, if you like, for this part of the Tall Ships Regatta, and it has been celebrated as such, and it's been enjoying that role. But there is an order of these ships that has been predetermined in conjunction with the Sail Training International, which maybe, Alan, you can speak a little bit about in terms of their involvement and their importance in this event.
Yes, well, like I say, they're kind of the world headquarters for sailing ships. And if you have a tall ship, if you want to be registered as an actual tall ship and take on sail trainees and become part of these international events, then you simply register with Sail Training International. You qualify by going through a number of details of the development of your vessel and the operation of your vessel and the kind of places you're willing to go. And then you can actually become a participant in these events. And you have to agree to take on sail trainees too. So it's not like just you and your family are going to be doing this for a lark sometimes. It's serious, because you're going to want to be able to teach navigation and how do you set those sails? How do you navigate? How do you know where you are in the middle of the fog, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? Those kinds of things are important to Sail Training International, and that's why we have this organization.
What an education that must be, an experience for young people who, and we should point out, they are not all people who come from seafaring communities by any means. These are people, and certainly in the case of Canada, lots of people who have never spent much time at all on the water find themselves on a tall ship for a training experience.
And there's no better way to learn about working as a team, to learn about yourself and your own limits, and to get over it. Just basically put it in quotations and get over it when you're on board one of these vessels.
Find your sea legs and get on with it, as you say. And we look now at those pleasure craft that are making a nice corridor, if you like, staying out of the way for the tall ships as they make their way.
And they're getting a good view. They're getting a water level view of some of the most beautiful queens of the sea.
Yeah, they're gorgeous, aren't they? And there's our kayaks, also keeping a nice safe distance. You talked about the training experience. A lot of these, or some of these tall ships at least, are operated by the military as training ships. We'll finish the parade of sail today with the HMCS Oriole, which is a training vessel that belongs to the Canadian Royal Navy, the Royal Canadian Navy.
It's one of the few ways to actually make these vessels an economic possibility. You bring on sail trainees and you charge them money to be there. or you have a school where the sail trainees are paying tuition to learn a number of things, including marine biology and oceanography, as well as navigation. Or you're a military vessel and it's part of your training, it's part of your seamanship training. And that's the case. Most countries have a sail training vessel. People may wink at Oriole thinking it's pretty small potatoes, but the sailors are very professional. They do a wonderful job on a vessel it's older than I am, and it's shinier and newer and a whole lot more capable than I am. And they do a tour of duty on Oriole, and they go places around the world that everybody else goes in a bigger ship.
You're doing pretty well yourself, Allan, just to make that point. We see in the middle of the screen there, that is Bluenose II, as we say, heading out the harbor. Behind that is another Nova Scotia-built ship, isn't it? This is Tree of Life, am I right?
Yeah, and there's an interesting comparison. You don't notice it at the moment, but Tree of Life is only half the size of Bluenose. If you saw them individually, you'd say they're almost exactly the same. And Tree of Life was one of those vessels that was built patterned on the famous Nova Scotia schooner design, but it's only half the length, it's only half the size, but it still looks just as nice.
Now this is a boat that was built by the Covey Island Boat Works in Nova Scotia, wasn't it?
Yep. Because, again, of Nova Scotia's tradition and reputation as the builders of fine schooners. Now, it's not a Nova Scotia resident. It's been in the States ever since it was built.
Yes.
But it travels around with the Sail Training International Fleet, shows off its colors, and I think I'm just as proud of Tree of Life as I am of Bluenose, because it's a sturdy, solid, beautiful Nova Scotia schooner.
It's a beautiful ship, registered out of Newport, Rhode Island now, and a lot of fir and spruce went into the making of that one. It's amazing that, as you say, we're talking about earlier before we went on the air, where this whole event is really about celebrating the culture and the history of tall ships and ship making and seafaring ways. And Tree of Life, just another example of that craftsmanship that exists in this province, still exists, all these decades after the heyday of the Age of Sail.
And we can't forget that they're so much safer now. It was always a safe and sturdy vessel, but with the modern technology that they've been able to fit into the ship, it's so much safer to be a sailor now. We don't remember back in the 30s and 40s, a lot of sailors went to sea and didn't come home. And that's not it still happens, but it's not happening nearly as often.
Let's have a look at this one.
This is Katie Bell.
Oh, yes.
And again, another reason to be proud of Nova Scotia craftsmanship. It's a little different. Again, it's only about half the size of the Bluenose, and it's a little different design. You wouldn't mistake this one for Bluenose. But again, it's on the schooner lines. It's a beautiful sailing vessel. When you're on board, you can feel the deck beneath you, and you know that you've got something solid and you're going places.
This is a really interesting story about the construction of this vessel. It's a story we've chronicled on our broadcasts over the years here in Nova Scotia. Two young cousins who decided they wanted to pay homage, I guess, or honor their family of shipbuilders, the Cameron boat builders in Nova Scotia, built this, and they built it on land and then took it down to Stewiacke, and as I recall, pushed it out with great success. It worked just fine.
About 40 kilometers from salt water. It was fun. And they had a great party when they launched it. They launched it into the Stewiacke River, which eventually took them into the Shubenacadie River and out to sea. But that's the way it was done in so many ports in Nova Scotia. Way up in Moncton, which is a long way up the Petitcodiac River.
Sure.
Quite a history of launching vessels from the mud into the fresh water and then downriver into the sea.
It's interesting, when you see some of the old pictures, and even when the day that this vessel was, the Katie Bell was launched, the apparatus that's used, it's really quite a simple procedure when you think about it. You build this ship. It's in some sort of not a harness or a structure along the shoreline. Literally, they just give it a good tug.
They take one peg out of the cradle, and oops, she's gone.
And you hope for the best that it's going to go, and it did just fine. And so there you go. It's proud to be part of this event these last few days. And as you say, it's another fine example of sailing, the craftsmanship that brings tall ships to life in this province.
Yep, and it'll be sailing for 50 years.
And that's something interesting too. Talk to me a little bit about the lifespan of some of these vessels, because we have some that are replicas or recreations of ships from another time, and we'll see some of those as we go along here. But also, we have some truly old vessels here. I'm thinking of one that's in the vicinity of 99 or 100 years of age.
Oh, yes.
Maybe, and others as well, I'm sure.
We have a couple that are older than 100
Older than
years.
that.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so what is the lifespan, and how do you get that mileage out of a tall ship?
Well, first of all, you have to start with really good wood, and we're fortunate here in Nova Scotia. We've got some good timber to deal with. Secondly, you have to keep replacing the bad bits. And it's like the story of the guy with the axe who replaced the handle several times and replaced the head several times.
The axe is still good.
But it's still a good axe. That's not quite true for these ships, but you do have to replace planks regularly. You do have, and we're looking,
Lorinda here now.
and we're looking at Lorinda, which was replaced almost from the keel up, and that's a positive story. But she's in tremendous shape, but she's been renewed. She's not that old, but she's got a lot of life in her yet. And you just have to keep at it. It's the maintenance, it's the maintenance, it's the maintenance.
So the Lorinda took the lines of an old Boston schooner, didn't it? I mean, this is a throwback to the 1700s when we look at this.
It's a recreation, fairly faithful recreation, although it's ferro cement and not pine and oak. Notwithstanding that, she's got a beautiful new deck. She's got wonderful bright work. The sails are all what's the word? Traditional. They're representational.
Yeah, I mean, it's got the feel of a Chinese junk, doesn't it? When you take a look at the sail pattern and the description of the ship.
Yeah, and USS Eagle has a sail like that on its after end as well. It's just a different way of rigging the ship.
Beautiful from the bow, isn't it? I mean, from the stern, from the
Yep.
bow, from all sides.
Yep.
What are we seeing there? There's windows. Would they be cabins there, or what is that?
That is the master's cabin back there. It's not that big. You can't. I can't stand up in there, but that's where the master's bunk is, and that's where his personal effects are kept. Yeah.
Life on these ships, what would that be like? As you're sailing around the world, even in the modern day, as you say, much safer than they were years past. But you're living in pretty cramped quarters on these vessels.
If you're tall like I am, you're going to want to get up on deck as much as possible. And way back in the days of the Spanish galleons, nobody lived below decks. Nobody wanted to be there other than to stretch out and go to sleep for their shift. But it wasn't good. I mean, these ships were working vessels. They were full of fish, they were full of salt, they were full of trade goods. They were carrying live animals if they were going from the old world to the new. And no, it was a cacophony of smells.
I'm sure there were some that were less pleasant than others.
Yeah.
For sure. But there you go. The harbor is, as you see, and just below, on the bottom of the screen there, you'll see the top of the mast of a ship going by. They are literally doing that loop around the harbor, and they've been asked to line up in a particular order, and they are making their way out. We began with Bluenose II. We've been mentioning HMCS Oriole briefly so far. It will be the final ship, and I guess that's fitting in many ways, Allan, because it's a Canadian start with Bluenose II and a Canadian finish.
That's right. And Oriole has sailed out of Halifax Harbor many, many times since pre-war days, back in the 30s and 40s. And God bless it, it's had a few planks replaced, but it's still sailing. It's still got a good future on the sea.
Yeah, beautiful indeed. And just, you couldn't ask for a better day than this. I know perhaps the sailors would say we'd like a little more wind, and maybe that would make the sails a little even more spectacular. But this is pretty nice stuff here today for sure. And the boat's keeping a safe distance there as the vessels continue with the parade of sail. Really, the culmination for the landlubbers, at least here, of this tall ships gathering in Halifax over the last few days, which has been, by all accounts, really considered to be quite a success.
Yes, in terms of the number of visitors on board, Bluenose was ecstatic because they were counting thousands of people lined up to get on board and to see it. But every other ship on the waterfront had lineups as well, so they're very pleased.
Yeah, there were a few crowd favors for sure, and the lineups were plenty long there. But one thing that people did remark on is that the crews of so many of the vessels were so friendly. I mean, in many ways, these ships and the crew on them are ambassadors for their countries or the organizations that they represent.
Yes, and when they signed on, be it in Portugal or Amsterdam or wherever, Bermuda, they wanted to go to sea. They wanted that blue ocean experience. But after 5 weeks with up and down, or cold fog, or whatever the conditions were, they're so glad to get on shore.
Sure.
First thing they want to shower,
Yep.
second thing they want a beer, and they want to see new people, they want to see new places. They're just happy to be here kind of people, and that's fun. I mean, that's another good thing about these parades of sail.
No, it's fantastic, and I know we saw a good many of the crew members making their way to some of the local establishments for a bite to eat, something that they probably didn't spend much time eating on board when they were in port here.
You get a little tired of shipboard food after a while,
I would think.
Yeah.
So they were filling up the waterfront as well, and I know speaking with some of the merchants on the Halifax waterfront, they have been just tickled pink with the revenue that's been coming in as a result of this weekend. And we have heard in the past that when tall ships visit this province and this port, that there can be 250,000 people come down to the water's edge to see them.
Yes, and it's the greatest free outdoor entertainment that they could have.
Yeah.
It's a real family event.
Yeah, it sure is.
The little kids and the stroll. I mean, the strollers were everywhere on the waterfront in the last couple of days, and big kids, little kids, old folks, new folks, wheelchairs. It was everybody's party.
No, it was really quite something to see. Everyone in a very festive mood, and plenty of water. Plenty of music as well to go along with the tall ships. We are seeing there to the bottom right portion of our screen. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that the Alexander von Humboldt?
It looks like Alexander von Humboldt to me.
Okay.
By the way, Alexander von Humboldt was a very famous German who actually inspired Darwin to do his work.
Interesting.
And he was remembered very fondly in Germany, although this ship is almost brand new. It's Alexander von Humboldt II. The original Alexander von Humboldt was named after, like I say, this brilliant biologist. The new one, because the chap was so well known and the first ship was so successful, the new one was built by the Beck Beer Company because it was a traveling ambassador for the brewery. Now, I mention that because it's not the only ship that was built by a brewery. Our Bluenose was.
Sure.
Cuddy Sark, the very...
Speaking of the Blue Noses, it makes its way up.
fully sailed now,
Yeah,
too.
isn't that a beautiful thing? But as you say, not the only one that's been built by a brewery.
No, and I think that's one of the only ways that these ships can be financed by big companies, and we give them a chance to market their product. I don't think anybody is speaking ill about that, but there are several around the world.
You have to pay for the ship somehow, don't you?
Yeah.
And we all know that Bluenose II cost a lot more than we thought it was going to at the time. But talk to me a little bit about some of these other vessels. I'm curious how they do pay their way, so to speak. I know that they do receive some payments or fees when they come to a harbor like Charlottetown, Charlottetown or Halifax, or as we say down the South Shore later.
Yep.
That's a bit of revenue for them, but you have to think that these are expensive ships to run and to own.
All of them have to have their marketing plan ready. And sometimes they serve as backdrops in movies, sometimes they serve as industrial promotion for a company that wants to entertain its prospective customers. They do charge the sail trainees to come on board. They do get a fee, you're right, from the Waterfront Development Corporation for being here. Wherever they go, they get free dockage. I mean, this is shore power and water and the kind of things that they require when they're in port. So that's free. I mean, if you and I just brought our yacht up to the wharf in Halifax, we'd have to pay dockage or wharfage. And so we should. These ones are given a bit of a break. But still, I mean, these are expensive ships just tied up at the jetty. When you're going to be taking them out to sea, you need people and you need the food to keep them going. And there's no end to the expense of owning a tall ship.
And they are mechanical forms of travel, and they break down occasionally, and things have to be fixed and repaired. I'm I'm sure that there are times, I haven't heard of anything happening in Halifax, but where a part is needed or a repair in port is required.
One of the reasons that Halifax is a popular spot for them, because those kind of services are available here. But I'll give you an example. We saw Lorinda just a few minutes ago. Lorinda was coming up from Bridgewater to be in Halifax for the tall ship event. Oh, the radar didn't work. Well, you know, that didn't immobilize it, but they didn't want to go to sea without a working radar.
Certainly not.
And so they were delayed, and so they were just a little late getting into port. Minor problem, almost not worth mentioning, but pretty common, pretty frequent, and another expense for the owner.
Yeah, incredible. We get to enjoy the majestic qualities of these ships, and we're happy to do that. But it obviously takes an effort and a considerable economic contribution to keep them sailing.
And you take a look at a ship from afar with all of its sails. It takes almost one or sometimes two people per sail.
Yeah.
So
that's a big crew.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a big crew. You can't sail without a dozen or 20 or 40 people.
You have to pay them something, or they
have to feed them.
You have to feed them at least.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So there we go. There are some of the tall ships making the way, and that is you know, the pattern that we're seeing here as they do the loop around. You see, we're looking over here. I believe that's probably McNabb's Island on the other side there.
Yep.
As they make the loop around, just as we are doing here with the Alexander von Humboldt II. To make the way out.
And that's an impressive vessel because it's green. And
Yeah.
I think it's partly green because of the Beck Brewing Company. But I mean, most of the vessels are either black or white, and this one is green. It's got green sails. It trades the sails out every once in a while. Sometimes they're white, but it makes it unique. Like Jolly Breeze, which is also here in the harbor, red sails, and it's a nice little touch.
As I recall, when the Alexander von Humboldt II came into port on Friday, it had the white sails up. I had seen the pictures of it with the green sails before, and it was spectacular. And talking with some people on the dock there, hoping that they would see that with the parade of sail, that the green sails would be up to match the green hull, and that is the case today, as the Alexander von Humboldt, along with the other tall ships here, make their way through the Halifax harbor.
We see Spaniel there, and that's unique as well because even though Latvia is an ocean-side country, even though Latvia is on the Baltic Sea, we don't see very many vessels from Latvia on the international scene. But that vessel, it's only 17 meters long, and it's a simple sloop, but it has sailed across the Atlantic, raced across the Atlantic to be here in Halifax with us.
Can we talk a little bit about what qualifies as a tall ship? Because obviously not all ships are tall ships. I know we have the different classes, the Class A, and Class B, and C and D. What is the basic prerequisite to be considered a tall ship?
Well, you look at Eagle, and you see the square sails, and the sails are suspended from cross arms that go up the mast that way. So any vessel, and that's called fully rigged or a square rigger, any vessel that's a square rigger is a Class A vessel. The very tall schooners are also Class A vessels, and we'll see a schooner in a second because they have the triangular sails that go straight up the mast that are suspended from the mast. These ones, the sails are suspended from the cross arms. But if they're really, really tall, if they're 40, 50 meters tall, they're Class A. But it goes down just basically in size from there. Bluenose, like I say, is Class A because she's so big, but a ship the size of Tree of Life, which I said was about half the size of the schooner, same rigging, same design, but just half the size, that's a Class B or a Class C.
The Class A tall ships, particularly this huge square sails, they're so distinctive looking, aren't they? I mean, that, I think when people envision sort of the most majestic of the tall ships, that's what they think of, isn't it?
Yeah, when you see something coming over the horizon and you know that you've been transported 200 years into the past, that's what you see.
Well, it's funny you say that because having spent some time on the waterfront this weekend myself, you would catch yourself having a look down the dock and you'd think, that's what it looked like 100 years ago or maybe 200 years ago.
Yes.
You know, it was really quite something.
And even 50 years ago, when the ships had lost their appeal and they weren't being built anymore. They weren't being maintained, they were being tied up. Halifax still had an awful lot of masts on the waterfront just 50 years ago. Now, unfortunately, it became a problem, and Halifax waterfront wasn't a nice place to be because of all the derelict vessels. But we've turned that around, and so has Charlottetown, so has St. John, so have a lot of the maritime ports, and God bless them, they're nice places to be.
Well,
now.
yeah, and people are coming to the waterfront now in those cities and those towns to experience things like this, and thankfully they are. You know, as we watch the Eagle go out there, when you hear the expression "cathedrals of the sea,"
that's another one.
Is that what we think of? Is that what would that be, a cathedral of the sea? Do you think?
Sure it is. Sure it is.
Beautiful.
And when you're up on the top of that mast, when you're having to go right up to the very
You're
top
praying?
and unfurl the sail, you're praying like you're in church. That's right.
I would think so. As we take one last look, perhaps at Bluenose II as it heads out, that is just a beautiful Nova Scotia image right
That's
there.
a
isn't it,
classic
Allan?
image. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, gorgeous. You get a sense of, now the boat that our camera is on there is obviously going at some speed past the U.S. Coast Guard vessel there, Eagle, but you get the sense that that's a pretty big ship when you get that close to it.
It is a big ship, and over 100 sailors on board, each doing their 3 or 4 month stint that is required of them before they can be full members of the U.S. Coast Guard.
That's impressive, as the USCGC Eagle, as it's formally known, could get another letter in there, it says goodbye to Halifax, and as we pointed out earlier, that it was a fan favorite for sure. There have been a few this past few days here in Halifax, but people love that one.
Yeah, and it's always nice to see their crew members too, because when they are given shore leave, they're turned out so well. The pants are got a crease in them, the shirts are well pressed, and the crew members are so polite.
Yeah.
And always eager to stop and tell a story too.
And that's great. That's all part of the education, isn't it, that,
Yep.
that the tall ships visit brings, because people who may be naturally curious about these ships, but until you get to meet some of the crew on board and maybe walk on those planks and take a look up the mast, it isn't until then that you really get a sense of maybe what life on one of these things might be like.
Yep, and every sailor has to go to the top of the mast. Every sailor does the duty. These aren't democratic institutions. Everybody does something.
Really?
Everybody does what they're told, and everybody does it well.
So you can't stay in your bunk and read a book and just come out on the nice days.
Or you can't only go to the first spar. You got to go.
All the way up.
Everybody's got to do it.
Yeah. This was a crowd pleaser, wasn't it? The
Yes,
bottom of our screen?
and it should be, because this is a very faithful reproduction of a 17th century Spanish galleon. It's called El Galeon. And what's really cool about this vessel is it's crewed by Spaniards with thick, heavy Spanish accents that
How
say,
authentic.
yes, how authentic is this vessel?
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know we have seen some images over the weekend of some of the crew who were quite spirited, jumping off the vessel into Halifax Harbour as part of the fun they were having. And I know they were quite keen to have our Colleen Jones climb the mast on Friday, the sport that she is. And we talk about how friendly the crew have been. Certainly the crew.
Oh, they're so
Galeon
proud
was
of their
that.
vessel.
Yeah, they are.
They know it's a faithful reproduction. They know that it transports you back several hundred years to the days of Cortez with his trade missions from the old world to the new, and they're very proud of that.
What are we seeing here coming around behind?
I think that's Attila.
Okay.
Attila is known, I'm not sure, it's a little bit distant, but Attila is known for its goofy activities, and flying a Jolly Roger as a topsail like that.
So Attila there, although we can't quite see, it has a kind of a reddish hull, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, I'm just not exactly sure what that is, but
I'm not sure. Well,
it looks to me.
The beauty of this, Allan, is we get a little time for them to get a little closer, and we'll be able to especially confirm it. But you know, people are sitting on the shoreline, as we are here in the studio, looking at these vessels and asking and saying the same thing, wondering what's what and who's who. But I think that is the Attila as I look at it now.
Yeah, another Spaniard, another crew that is known for its pleasant dockside activities, and they also do a lot of serious work as well, and they're known for marine mammal research and for spreading the good word of the importance of oceanography and ocean sustainability.
An important message to say the least, and they've been spreading that word in Halifax these last few days. So many of the tall ships have been reminding us about our maritime history, our nautical history in this part of the world, and how important it's been in helping not only to build this country, to build countries worldwide, because shipping was the means of transportation.
It's the reason we're here, yeah. Yeah, I was talking about a square rigger. Well, this is, well, we almost lost it, but the ships that we can see there now are not square riggers.
No, that's right.
Their sails have gone straight up the mast, and they're schooners or ketches or sloops. They're not barks or brigantines or square-rigged vessels.
And so, in terms of design of these things, I mean, obviously schooners are built for speed and so on. Because do these tall ships, particularly some of these Class A vessels with the square-rigged, the huge square-rigged sails, they're built. Are they built for stability? Does that help for the speed? Why that design of that sail for that boat?
Yeah, good question. It's not the design for the boat, it's the design for the work that it has to do. And El Galeon was a big, almost round,
yes.
You know, it's solid.
Sure
but
is.
It was meant for carrying freight. Something like Attila was meant for getting out and getting back with a cargo. And we saw Jolly Breeze there a little while ago, which was built specifically for speed. Some of them are just cutters. They were just meant to get their crew to where they were going quickly, but some of them were meant as freighters.
Beautiful with all the sails out, isn't it? That's just a remarkable image.
Yeah, and she's so proud of herself, and you know, she's got her name on her topsail, and she's so happy to be here.
The crew waving right at us there. There you
Yeah.
go. Friendly as can be.
Yeah.
Just a gorgeous, gorgeous vessel there. Well, there was in the vicinity of 27 tall ships for this event here in Halifax, and as we talked earlier, some of them will be going on. I believe it's about 11 that are going on to continue in the regatta and to sail to France. I'm not sure of how they've been doing at the various legs and who's been leading the pack, but obviously people in Nova Scotia have been really enjoying getting a close-up look at them these last few days as we look at our harbor cam shot here, the high and wide shot.
And it's also a nice connection between Halifax and Le Havre, because that's where the Europeans left to come to North America. They were fishermen or they were traders. They were looking for opportunities to make money in the New World, and they left from Le Havre to come here. So it's kind of a nice connection to see them going back.
It's kind of like coming full circle when it comes to history that way, which is obviously a nice touch and adds to the meaning of it all. And what are we looking at here?
We're looking at Oosterschelde, which is another Dutch vessel. The Dutch are very, very seaworthy. I don't think that's the right way to put it, but they're very well known in these events. Oosterschelde, that's sort of the eastern end of the Ooster River, which connects Rotterdam and Amsterdam.
Okay.
And when the camera pans back, you'll see that it's a mixture of both square sails and round sails. Or not round sails, square sails and the schooner type sails. And those top sails are just a way that its original designer felt would be a way to catch more wind, because they really needed to get where they were going in their minds as fast as possible.
Really, the sails in many ways really give these tall ships their personalities, don't they? I mean, it's so beautiful just to see that right now, and as you say, it's the combination of sails that makes that ship look so distinct.
Yeah, that's a topsail schooner. You see the schooner sails aft, and you see the jibs in the front, but those two topsails give it a different look entirely.
And flying the Canadian flag there, that's nice to see, isn't it?
No, that has to be done.
Oh,
yeah. Sorry.
It's a matter of protocol, is it?
It's a matter of protocol. Yeah, she'll be flying the Dutch flag as well, of course, because she's a Dutchman. But no, they always fly the flag of the country they're in.
So those vessels have a good many flags on them for a good many countries. Obviously, you want to follow protocol when you come into port.
Yes, and you also had to have signal flags too, because in the days before communication devices, ship to ship, you told each other what you were doing by the flags that you signaled.
Certainly. Are you knowledgeable, competent in that regard?
Not a chance, not a chance. But I can tell you, there's a couple of masts up on Signal Hill. And
yes.
people look at Signal Hill and they say, why are those masts up there? It's not a ship. Maybe that's where the original Bluenose is buried. and those kind of jokes abound. But those masts were for signaling the ships coming in the harbor. There were certain arrays of flags, certain order that were sent up the mast on Signal Hill that told the ships that were entering port.
I've had that same comment made to me by tourists as I'm walking around Citadel Hill.
Yeah, it's a good joke.
There's a ship up there.
It's a good joke.
It's a bad place for a ship to be, that to say the least.